Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to a time when medicine was basically gambling. The word science meant witchcraft, and self-care was rubbing herbs on your forehead and hoping for the best. That's right. Tonight we're talking about what drugs people actually took in medieval times. Spoiler alert, most of them were just plants, dirt, or things you'd scrape off the bottom of a shoe. Before we dive in, do me a favor and tap that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment, but only if you actually enjoy this kind of ridiculous midnight history. Tell me where you're listening from and, more importantly, what questionable herbal tea you're sipping tonight. I read every comment, especially the ones from people awake at 3 a.m. and questioning their life choices. Now dim the lights, put a fan on for that cozy background hum, and get comfortable. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what would happen if you lived in a world where doctors prescribed you wine for sadness, recommended eating moss for a headache, and thought sniffing burnt feathers might help with your digestion? Would you survive a week with only herbal potions and prayers? Could you handle a night of sleep after drinking a mysterious potion called Wormwood cordial? Or would you start seeing flying monks, too? Did peasants get painkillers? Or did they just bite a stick and make awkward eye contact with the village goat? And if you had the flu, would your local apothecary hand you a flower, a frog, or a lecture about the four humours? Congratulations! You've just woken up in 1373, an age when your doctor's best advice was don't die, and your favourite drug might be literally anything you found growing next to a graveyard. You stagger through the mud with a cough that sounds like a haunted accordion and arrive at the medieval apothecary, otherwise known as Old Agnes's hut. The shelves are lined with jars of questionable origins, roots, powders, and something that might be a squirrel. The air smells like wet hay and existential dread. You explain your symptoms. Agnes nods wisely, pokes you with a stick, and offers you a bag of sleeping seeds, which are just poppy pods. No prescription, no insurance. Just the hope that whatever you're taking isn't deadly in large doses. You take a seat on a rickety three-legged stool while Agnes shuffles around her barn/laboratory, muttering about humours and evil winds. Her cat, a one-eyed beast named Toothless, stares at you from the rafters. The waiting room, if you can call it that, is just a pile of straw and two chickens pecking at something that might have been last week's patient. The counter is a warped wooden table covered in wax, animal bones, and a loaf of bread with mysterious green bits. There's no soothing background music, just the steady drip of something leaking through the roof. You cough again, harder this time, and Agnes throws you a look like you just insulted her best goat. She opens a jar, wafting a scent into the room that can only be described as vintage compost. "This'll sort your lungs," she says, holding out a chunk of dried root. "Chew on it and try not to die." You have questions. So many questions, but you realize this is the closest thing to medical care you're going to get. Besides, what could go wrong? You nibble the root. It tastes like dirt mixed with burnt toast, and immediately makes your tongue go numb. You decide this is either a very good sign or a very bad one. While you wait for the feeling to return to your mouth, Agnes roots through her herbal archive, pulling out little bundles tied with string. She explains, mostly to herself, that every illness has its cure, as long as you believe hard enough and don't ask for a refund. She offers you a homemade syrup, honey mixed with onion juice and something unidentifiable. You drink it because you're afraid not to. The flavor is so strong it might be burning a new path through your insides, but you're not sure if that's the medicine working or your soul trying to leave your body. The consultation is brisk. Agnes diagnoses you with an imbalance of the humours, which in medieval medical speak means you look terrible and I'm just guessing. To fix this, she hands you a rag soaked in vinegar to sniff 3 times a day and instructs you to avoid eating cold porridge, staring at the moon, or thinking about frogs. You nod politely, not sure if you've just received ancient wisdom or a secret curse. At checkout, meaning as you try to leave without knocking over a goat, Agnes reminds you that payment is due in eggs, firewood, or gossip about your neighbour's suspicious rash. You pay with a slightly cracked egg and a story about the miller's daughter sneezing at mass. She throws in a special powder for free, likely dried nettles, or possibly leftover sawdust. As you trudge home, clutching your various remedies, you realize you've just experienced the full medieval healthcare package. A diagnosis based on hunches, a prescription written in dirt, and a follow-up plan that mostly involves prayer. Modern medicine might have side effects, but at least none of them include occasional rat infestation. And that's your first trip to the pharmacy, where the customer is rarely right, the treatment is always an adventure, and survival is 60% luck, 40% immune system, and 100% willingness to choose something that tastes like the underside of a cart. Welcome to Healthcare, 1373 edition. Welcome to medieval medical theory, where every ailment is caused by your humors being out of whack. Too much blood? Too little black bile? Congratulations, you're about to get bled, purged, or force-fed a herbal concoction that tastes like bitter regret. The village barber surgeon twirls his mustache and pulls out his favorite tool, a rusty bowl. You've come to see him because your head hurts. Your stomach is making strange noises, and you haven't slept since the last full moon. He greets you with all the warmth of a man who's spent the morning sharpening razors on his own boot. You try to explain your symptoms, but it doesn't matter. He's already decided your problem is an excess of yellow bile. How does he know? He squints at your tongue, pokes your belly, and sniffs loudly, as if expecting to catch a whiff of malignant vapors. This is the closest thing you're going to get to a diagnosis in 1373. He lectures you about the four humors, gesturing to a helpful diagram drawn on a pigskin scrap. Blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. It's like soup, he says. Only instead of carrots and potatoes, you're made of vaguely horrifying bodily fluids. Good health is all about balance. Bad health? That's when one ingredient decides to throw a medieval house party in your intestines. He asks what you've been eating. You say, turnips and bread. He nods, looking grave. Too much phlegm. Classic. He blames the weather, your personality, and, at one point, your mother-in-law. In medieval Europe, weather is a medical condition, and your relatives were a risk factor. You protest that you're usually quite healthy, aside from the waking nightmares, the mysterious rash, and that incident with the bee sting that wouldn't stop oozing. But he's not listening. He's rummaging through a chest of tools, mostly blades, leeches, and linen bandages, the color of sad porridge. Let's begin with some bloodletting, he announces. You nod, because refusing would be rude, and you're not sure what the alternative island, possibly exorcism. He ties a rag around your arm with the enthusiasm of someone wrapping a Christmas gift they don't actually like. He pulls out a knife that's seen better centuries. Just a little off the top, he jokes, before making a small cut. You watch your precious blood drip into the rusty bowl, wondering if anyone in history has ever gotten better from this. Next, he prescribes a herbal purge, an actual potion brewed from wormwood, wild garlic, and a pinch of something secret. It smells like despair and tastes worse. You drink it because the last person who refused now haunts the latrine. Your stomach immediately regrets this decision, but you're assured it's a sign of effectiveness. For those not squeamish enough for cutting or purging, there's always a good vomit-inducing powder, or perhaps a steaming cup of liverwort tea, served with a knowing smile and the advice to stay close to the outdoors for the next several hours. If your humors aren't balanced after this, at least you won't care anymore. He might also suggest lifestyle changes. No more cold foods, avoid sleeping near running water, never wear green on Thursdays, and for heaven's sake, avoid looking at ugly people during sunrise. It all makes as much sense as a horoscope, but with higher risk of anemia. After your treatment, you're handed a tonic in a recycled wine bottle. Drink thrice daily, before prayers, after meals, and during moments of existential crisis. You leave the barber surgeon's hut lighter by a pint of blood, a week's wages, and all dignity. As you limp home, you realize the medieval approach to health is like trying to fix a leaky roof by throwing rocks at it, random, enthusiastic, and somehow worse than doing nothing. But you have to admit, there's a certain logic. When the cure is this rough, you'll forget all about your original complaint. At least until the next time your soup gets out of balance. Welcome to life in the age of humors, where everyone's just one leech away from perfect health, or at least from a new story to tell the cows. You've heard rumors of a magical plant that helps you sleep through even the worst plagues, the poppy. The apothecary crushes the seeds, mixes them with wine, and hands you a cup. It's the medieval version of NyQuil, except with a much higher chance of hallucinating that your shoes are talking to you. You stare at the cloudy red liquid, weighing your options. On one hand, you haven't had a full night's sleep since the village blacksmith tried singing you a lullaby. And on the other, the last miracle cure you took left you dreaming about dancing goats for 3 days. Still, desperate times, desperate measures. You take a sip. The taste is rich, slightly bitter, and tinged with the unmistakable flavor of something you hope was meant to be in there. The apothecary watches you closely, as if waiting to see if you'll fall over or start reciting poetry. Good for nightmares, coughs, toothaches, and the neighbors snoring, she assures you. And if you drink enough, you won't care about any of it. You nod, feeling the warmth seep through your limbs. Medieval insomniacs, it turns out, were just people with access to better plants and lower expectations for tomorrow morning. As the minutes pass, you feel your eyelids grow heavy. Your limbs turn to pudding. The apothecary tucks you into a heap of hay, pats your head, and whispers, "See you on the other side." For a moment you panic, but then you remember. This is just her way of saying good night. Probably. Outside, the village carries on. Cows lowing, dogs barking, the sound of a far-off argument about turnips. None of it bothers you anymore. For the first time in weeks, you're drifting. The poppy has worked its gentle, numbing magic, and the endless misery of medieval life, aches, chills, existential dread, fades into a blissful fog. Poppy was the Middle Ages' go-to plant for just about every complaint that started with, "I can't sleep," and ended with, "And also my foot fell off." Its uses were legendary. Mixed with wine for pain relief, sprinkled on wounds, and even steeped in milk for teething babies, who after 2 sips were reported to nap so soundly that even the rooster got jealous. Side effects were mostly ignored. So was the concept of safe dosing. In medieval medicine, the only overdose warning was don't take as much as your cousin did. The town's more adventurous souls used poppy for creative pursuits. Need to forget a failed harvest, a broken heart, or a particularly traumatic public bath? Poppy tea to the rescue. Of course, sometimes you woke up missing a day and half your bread. The wise woman claims she once dreamt herself into the next village over, where she met a talking sheep and returned with a mysterious rash. No one asked questions. This was normal. Poppy's greatest value, though, was during plagues and pestilence. When sleep was hard to come by and nightmares were just your brain's way of processing all the creative ways you could die before breakfast. You take your dose, drift off, and hope to wake up when the rats have left and the fever's gone. If you're lucky, you just wake up groggy. If you're less lucky, you wake up with stories you're not sure actually happened. Medieval chroniclers even mention poppy somniferum in their recipe books. Right alongside honeyed mead, boiled cabbage, and advice about never trusting a doctor with more than 3 fingers. Some apothecaries made poppy cakes or candies, little sticky bundles that promised dreamless nights and, occasionally, a new personal relationship with gravity. Eventually, the potion wears off. You wake, groggy but strangely refreshed, and realize you've missed the morning chicken theft and half a sermon about sin. Your dreams are a blur, your cough is softer, and for once, You don't mind the sound of the sheep in the next room. Was it worth it? If your shoes do start talking, you decide. At least you'll finally have someone to listen to your complaints. In a world where pain relief meant biting a stick and sleep aid usually involved a priest, the humble poppy was a gift, and a gentle reminder that sometimes blissful ignorance really is the best medicine. Feeling a little anxious? The local healer recommends wine, sore joints, beer for breakfast. In medieval times, alcohol wasn't just for parties, it was medicine, disinfectant, and emotional support all in one mug. Even kids drank it. Water was for chumps. It's not that people didn't want to drink water. It's just that every time someone did, they rolled the dice on dysentery, parasites, or something called the flux, which sounds as bad as it island. Meanwhile, the village stream doubles as the bath, the laundry, and the unofficial grave for at least 3 unfortunate chickens. So, after your 3rd or 4th bout of bad belly, you decide it's safer to pour another cup of ale and call it self-care. You wake up and reach for your first drink of the day, small beer, they call it. Don't worry, it's not a frat party. This stuff is so weak you could probably wash your hands with it. But it's boiled. It's mildly alcoholic. And crucially, it's less likely to kill you than whatever's floating in the well. The kids get a mug, grandma gets a mug, and even the dog sometimes laps up the leftovers. Congratulations. You're living in a world where hair of the dog is literally breakfast. Later, you wander to the tavern for your morning health consultation. The local alewife is also the closest thing your village has to a pharmacist. She slides you a tankard and asks what ails you. Headache? More ale. Cold coming on? Try hot-spiced wine, guaranteed to warm your bones, your spirits, and possibly your face if you drink it too fast. Back pain? That'll be a pint of strong cider and a lecture about the dangers of lifting sacks of turnips without proper stretching. You're feeling bolder after a few drinks, so you ask about real medicine. The apothecary explains that alcohol draws out the bad humors, which is a polite way of saying it makes you forget you were sick. Wine, in particular, is praised for its medicinal virtues. Doctors prescribe it for melancholy, constipation, and even the plague, on the theory that nothing contagious can survive in someone this cheerfully intoxicated. It's not just the poor who rely on booze. The nobles are even more committed. In the Lord's Hall, there's always a barrel of wine ready for emergencies, arguments, or Wednesdays. Fancy herbal liqueurs make an appearance, flavored with wormwood, sage, or anything else the castle gardener is trying to get rid of. If the Baron complains of sleeplessness, his doctor recommends mulled wine and bed rest, which means drinking until you forget you ever needed sleep. Monks take brewing to the next level. In the abbey, beer is made with care, devotion, and the kind of attention to detail usually reserved for relics. The result, rich, strong ale, theoretically for charity, practically for the monk's personal consumption. You visit the monastery with a cough, and the friar hands you a foaming mug, winks, and tells you to pray for moderation. You decide God probably wants you to have another. Of course, there's a downside. After a full day of self-medicating, the village square turns into a festival of the tipsy. People argue loudly about nothing. Old men sing songs that haven't been in tune since the last crusade. Someone inevitably tries to ride a pig. You wake up the next morning with a pounding head, a sore throat, and a vague memory of telling the bailiff that you could totally outdrink a Norman. But hangovers are just another medical opportunity. The healer recommends, what else? A little more beer, maybe mixed with eggs, garlic, or whatever herb she can grab with one hand while holding her own head with the other. There's even a special cure called aleberry. Hot ale, sugar, and toasted bread, served to anyone sick, sad, or unlucky enough to have been caught singing after midnight. In the end, medieval people weren't just drinking for fun. They were drinking for survival. In a world where water was hazardous and medicine was, at best, experimental, a pint of something strong was your shield against germs, anxiety, and the endless absurdities of daily life. And if you're still worried about your liver, don't be. You're more likely to be trampled by an ox on market day, so next time you raise a glass, remember, in the Middle Ages, you'd be doing it for your health. Cheers to that. And good luck tomorrow morning. The apothecary pulls out a gnarled root shaped suspiciously like a screaming baby. It's Mandrake, famous for its sleep-inducing properties and its tendency to scream when pulled from the earth. You're told to chew it for toothache. Side effects include intense dreams, mild death, and waking up naked in a sheep pen. You stare at the root, which genuinely looks like it might ask you for a bedtime story. The apothecary lowers her voice and explains, with all the seriousness of a tax collector, that Mandrake isn't just any plant, it's practically magic. In the right dose, it'll numb your pain and send you drifting off to the best sleep of your life. In the wrong dose, you might meet St. Peter a little sooner than planned. But let's not dwell on the negative. She demonstrates by slicing off a thin sliver and popping it in her own mouth. Her left eye twitches for a moment, but she seems otherwise fine, by medieval standards, anyway. You take your own sliver, chew it, and immediately regret several life choices. The taste is earthy, bitter, and tinged with the flavor of something that probably has unresolved emotional trauma. You're told to let the juice sit on your gums and think calming thoughts, which, in medieval Europe, mostly means try not to remember the last time you ate anything green. As you sit, the apothecary regales you with Mandrake folklore. According to legend, the Mandrake plant doesn't just scream. It summons the spirits of the dead when uprooted. Peasants devised elaborate rituals to harvest it, usually involving a dog, a moonless night, and more drama than a season of reality TV. If the plant screamed, the dog took the curse. If it didn't, you'd better hope your hearing survived, because the root was now yours, assuming the neighbors didn't accuse you of witchcraft first. You're also warned that chewing Mandrake may cause visions, everything from talking animals to shadowy figures that might or might not be your ancestors. Some people claimed they saw angels. Others just wandered the village, tried to milk the chickens, and fell asleep in the grain store. Either way, it's entertainment you can't get on a medieval Friday night unless you're truly desperate. Eventually, your jaw starts to tingle. The toothache fades into a distant memory, replaced by a pleasant fog in your brain and a sudden appreciation for how soft the apothecary's sheep look. Your legs feel wobbly, your thoughts are cotton, and the room's corners grow just a bit rounder. The apothecary gently encourages you to lie down if you need to, which is code for "don't fall on my good butter churn." Meanwhile, Mandrake's reputation spreads beyond sleep and pain relief. The root is a favorite among herbalists for sedating patients before grisly dental extractions, setting broken limbs, or treating hysteria, which in medieval terms means any emotion expressed after dark. Sometimes it's brewed into a soporific potion or mixed with wine to knock you out for minor surgery, a process with the success rate of flipping a coin in a hurricane. As you drift in and out of consciousness, you realize that medieval self-care is just a series of escalating dares. The line between herbal remedy and accidental exorcism is thin, and everyone knows at least one person who tried Mandrake and never quite came back. Local priests mutter about the dangers of dabbling with such plants, but even the bishop needed a good night's sleep occasionally. You wake up hours later, groggy, drooling, and surprisingly well-rested, except for a sheep giving you judgmental side-eye. Your toothache is gone. So is your memory of the last 12 hours. The apothecary assures you that's normal, hands you a cup of weak beer for the road, and suggests next time you try something less dramatic, like biting a stick. In the end, Mandrake is a cure, a curse, and the medieval equivalent of pressing random on the sleep aid menu. Take a bite, say a prayer, and hope your dreams are less weird than your reality. Need a mood booster? Try Wormwood, bitter, toxic, and excellent for chasing away worms, and, occasionally, your sense of reality. Henbane, meanwhile, makes you see things that aren't there, and is great for witchcraft. Medieval medicine. Basically just a risky game of plant roulette. You arrive at the village healer's shack, eyes red from lack of sleep, and nerves frayed from living next to a family of particularly loud geese. The healer grins, her teeth stained suspiciously green, and invites you to sit on a stool made from what might have been a wheelbarrow. You ask for something to help with the melancholy, a medieval catch-all for sadness, exhaustion, or just the feeling you get when you remember you have to eat boiled turnips again tonight. She starts with wormwood, good for digestion, bad for everything else, she declares, holding up a bundle of dried stalks. Wormwood is famous for making absinthe, but tonight it's going in your tea. She boils a handful, throws in a pinch of mystery powder, and hands you the mug. You take a sip. It tastes like someone melted a tire over a campfire and then dared you to drink it. Your tongue instantly regrets all your decisions, but at least your stomach feels different. Not better, just different. Next comes henbane, which the healer calls witch's delight. It's got a reputation for causing visions, mild confusion, and, in higher doses, the sort of out-of-body experience usually reserved for saints and people struck by lightning. She crushes the dried leaves, mixes them with honey, and tells you to eat just a pinch. You try not to notice the cauldron in the corner, labeled emergency antidote. After a few minutes, the world takes on a new texture. The fire crackles louder. The shadows in the corner start discussing medieval politics. You blink, and the geese outside sound like they're singing madrigals. You start to see why people in the Middle Ages were so convinced magic was real. When your medicine cabinet doubles as a psychedelic sampler platter, reality becomes negotiable. Wormwood and henbane aren't just for fun. Healers use them to numb pain, sedate the nervous, and help people forget everything from heartbreak to dental surgery. The local blacksmith swears by wormwood for his aching joints, though he also swears at invisible frogs and once challenged a fence post to a duel. Henbane, meanwhile, is a favorite for love potions, curses, and long nights when you'd rather not be awake for whatever's howling outside. If you overdo it, which, let's be honest, is just a question of time, you risk seeing the kind of things that make you want to befriend the village priest and apologize for your entire existence. Medieval texts are full of warnings. Do not take henbane if you value your mind, wormwood. Only in small doses unless you wish to meet the fairies. And, occasionally, if your ears start ringing, it's time to stop. The line between healer and accidental sorcerer is about as thin as your chances of living to 40. The healer tries to reassure you. All medicine is poison, it's just about the amount. You nod, sipping more tea, and wonder if she says this to everyone, or just the ones who look like they might start levitating. For good measure, she offers you a handful of mugwort for your pillow, promising interesting dreams and possibly a vision of your future husband. You accept, because at this point, why not? The mugwort smells like crushed hope and old socks. As you stagger home, legs lighter, mind buzzing, reality slightly untethered, you realize that medieval self-care is less about feeling better and more about rolling the dice on temporary oblivion. Some nights you wake up refreshed. Other times, you wake up wearing half a chicken and no pants. In the end, wormwood and henbane are a reminder that history's medicine chest was filled with adventure, danger, and just enough magic to keep people guessing. And if you see the geese bowing as you pass, you'll know the herbs worked. Or maybe it's just Tuesday. Either way, you're feeling something. You're feeling sluggish. The solution? Leeches. Lots of leeches. The barber surgeon plops a handful onto your arms, assuring you it'll balance your humors. It's cold, slimy, and oddly calming. Until you realize you're just really dizzy. You start to wonder if you might prefer feeling sluggish after all. The barber surgeon, resplendent in his blood-spattered apron and the faint aroma of boiled onions, leans in with a professional air. "Ah, yes," he says, inspecting the leeches wriggling happily across your forearm. "You've got too much blood, my friend. It happens to the best of us." He says this as if it's as common as having too many socks. You try to recall the last time you met someone who complained about having an excess of blood. It's never. But medieval science is firm on this point. Health is just a matter of keeping your insides slightly emptier than your outsides. Bloodletting is the answer to everything. Headache? Lose a pint. Fever? Lose 2. Melancholy? Have you considered a quart? It's sort of like tuning a car, except the car is your body and the mechanic is a guy with a bowl and an extremely cavalier attitude towards sanitation. He explains the process with the pride of someone who's read exactly one medical textbook, and most of it was drawings of sad-looking livers. First, the leeches, sourced from only the finest local swamps, are gently encouraged to latch on. You ask what makes a leech fine, and he just winks and changes the subject. As the leeches do their work, you notice your arm growing numb, the room getting warmer, and your sense of dignity quietly exiting through the open window. If you're lucky, you get the premium treatment, the double bleed. This involves cutting open a vein on the other arm while the leeches handle the first. The barber surgeon refers to this as really getting the bad stuff out. You refer to it as possibly my last conscious memory. All around you, other patients recline on straw pallets, pale but strangely serene, as if they've decided resistance is pointless. In the background, you hear stories of how the nobility take this even further. The king's physician is said to travel with a special box of golden leeches, because regular leeches simply aren't prestigious enough for royal blood. In some cases, a full liter of blood is removed for balance, which, if nothing else, balances the patient between the worlds of the living and the deeply confused. It's not all bloodletting, of course. Some barber surgeons like to mix it up with a bit of cupping, where heated glass cups are placed on the skin to draw blood to the surface, resulting in impressive bruises and absolutely zero relief. You're not sure what's worse, the feeling of losing blood, or the aftercare instructions, which are essentially try not to faint in public and eat some bread if you still have teeth. By now, you're a pint lighter and feeling as woozy as a poet at a wine festival. The barber surgeon hands you a chunk of dried fruit and tells you to walk it off. He assures you that you'll feel as good as new by tomorrow, or possibly by next harvest. You stumble outside, leech marks dotting your skin, and realize medieval medicine is mostly a test of your willingness to survive the cure. You pass the village square, where another patient, pale and slightly glassy-eyed, gives you a knowing nod. You nod back. It's the universal sign of having just donated more blood than a modern Red Cross van would ever legally allow. And that's how sluggishness is solved in the Middle Ages. By draining you until you can't remember why you felt bad in the first place. You may be weaker, but at least your humors are balanced. Or so they say. On the bright side, with a little luck and a steady diet of porridge, you'll live to be bled again. Welcome to wellness, medieval style, just enough leeches to keep you humble and never enough energy to complain. Looking for pain relief? Here, try some deadly nightshade. The berries are beautiful and toxic, but a skilled healer can use tiny amounts to dull pain or calm a cough. One mistake, and you're off to meet the saints a little early. You stare at the little glass jar in the healer's hand. Its contents a handful of glossy black berries that look suspiciously like candy, if you grew up in a time before anyone invented candy. The healer, a woman with the calm confidence of someone who's never personally eaten their own medicine, explains that this is belladonna, which literally means beautiful lady. You suspect this is ironic. She assures you that, used correctly, it can take the edge off a toothache, soothe a raging fever, or, if you're unlucky, provide the most peaceful sleep you'll ever have. You listen as she rattles off a list of ailments that nightshade can treat. Muscle spasms, gout, and those mysterious female complaints that no one ever seems to describe out loud. But for every use, there's a warning. The difference between a miracle cure and a medieval funeral is, apparently, measured in seeds. Take too much, and you won't have to worry about pain ever again. Take too little, and you're still in agony. Only now your healer is staring at you nervously and muttering prayers. She picks out a single berry, slices it, and adds a sliver to your cup of sour wine. You try not to think about the graveyard on the hill. Sip slowly, she says, and if you start to see angels or the room gets especially wobbly, let me know. Good advice, assuming you can still speak. The taste is oddly sweet, with a hint of bitterness, and that special tingle you get when your body suspects you're about to make a big mistake. The first effect is a gentle numbness, spreading from your gums down to your shoulders. It's soothing, until you realize your eyelids are getting heavy, and your thoughts are floating somewhere near the ceiling. The healer watches carefully, making sure you don't slide off your stool. For a few precious moments, your pain melts away. You feel lighter, almost giddy, and you wonder why more people aren't lining up for this magical fruit. Then the room tilts a little, and you remember the extreme risk part of the sales pitch. Nightshade is famous for its dark side. Medieval physicians knew it was a two-edged sword, so useful and so easily fatal. There are tales of noblemen accidentally overdosing while trying to cure a headache, or of enemies using it to spike the wine at a feast. Witches are rumoured to keep belladonna in their gardens, not just for spells, but as a handy way to escape awkward situations, or create a few. And if you're a woman looking for a dash of medieval glamour, a drop of nightshade juice in the eyes is said to make your pupils large and your stare irresistible. Of course, this is also how you accidentally go blind. But beauty is pain, and sometimes, apparently, so is vision. In the healer's hut, the line between medicine and poison is a matter of trust and luck. The healer wipes her hands on her apron and offers you a bit of bread to settle your humours. She recommends you rest, stay out of strong sunlight, and avoid any sudden decisions, like climbing ladders, confessing secrets, or starting a sword fight. By nightfall, the pain has faded, replaced by a gentle euphoria and a sense of having survived something legendary. You fall asleep, your dreams a swirl of dancing saints, luminous berries, and the faint echo of your healer's warning. Remember, not all remedies come with a second chance. In medieval times, pain relief was a gamble, and the house almost always won. Nightshade was the wild card. Beautiful, useful, and always one tiny step away from disaster. You made it through this time. Next time, maybe just try biting a stick. Villagers swear by odd remedies. Bee stings for arthritis, spider oil for warts, mashed frogs for sore throats. Sometimes you feel better. Sometimes you just get a new problem and a fun story to tell in the afterlife. You've woken up with a sore throat and a sense of impending doom, which, in medieval times, is just called Tuesday. Your neighbour Gertrude, who claims to have cured her own lumbago with a combination of moonlight and pickled onions, has plenty of advice. She shows up on your doorstep with a basket of suspicious supplies, a jar of something that moves, a dead frog, and her favourite medicinal bee. Hold still, she says, with the confidence of someone who's only occasionally set things on fire. First up, bee sting therapy. For your aching joints, she insists. Let the bees do their work. You try to protest, but before you can finish, Gertrude is already shaking a half-asleep bee onto your hand. The pain is immediate, sharp, and strangely satisfying, at least until your hand swells up like a medieval bread loaf. Means it's working, she says, while searching for a spare cabbage leaf to tie around your wrist. Next up, spider oil for your stubborn wart. The oil is actually just a dead spider floating in what might be lamp oil, or possibly last year's soup. She dabs it onto your skin, all the while recounting the story of her uncle, who grew an extra toe but never had a wart again. You notice she never mentions what happened to the toe. The oil is cold and smells faintly of regret. your wart tingles. So, do your doubts about this entire process. Now it's time for the pièce de résistance. Mashed frog for your sore throat. Gertrude produces a limp frog, mashes it with a rock, and spreads the resulting goop on a rag. You're told to wrap it around your neck and leave it overnight. The sensation is cold, slimy, and profoundly humbling. You try not to think about whether the frog had dreams, too. The family dog refuses to make eye contact for the rest of the evening. Every remedy comes with a story. The local baker claims he cured his gout by burying his feet in warm compost every morning for a week. The miller's wife recommends sheep dung poultices for headaches. Just don't get it in your eyes. And of course, there's the tried and true advice of holding your breath and counting to 100, which either fixes the problem or distracts you long enough to forget it existed. Sometimes the cure is worse than the illness. A neighbor, after trying goose grease for a persistent cough, spends 3 days sliding off every chair in the house. Someone else develops a mysterious rash after using stinging nettle tea to treat a fever. The local priest suggests prayer and cold water, which only makes you wet and worried about the afterlife. Still, there's a method to the medieval madness. The remedies might be wild, but they're born of desperation, trial, and whatever the cat dragged in. Folk wisdom is passed down by word of mouth, often with the warning, "It worked for my cousin." Sort of. You never really know if the treatment or just sheer stubbornness did the trick. By bedtime, your sore throat is still sore. Your joints itch from the bee, and you've developed a mild fascination with frogs. You wrap up in bed, covered in strange smells and cabbage leaves, hoping tomorrow brings either a miracle or just fewer visitors. In the morning, you feel different. Not better, not worse, just slightly altered, like a soup that's been reheated too many times. The wart is still there, the pain has moved to a new joint. And Gertrude is already knocking, eager to try her new remedy involving snail shells and boiled wheat. Such is life in medieval times. Every illness a community event, every cure an adventure, and every day a reminder that sometimes laughter really is the best medicine, especially when you're still here to laugh about it. You stumble into a monastery, where the monks tend lush gardens filled with mint, sage, and lavender. Their medicine? Herbal infusions, spiked wine, and enough honey to drown your sorrows and your germs. Everything is blessed, sometimes twice, just in case. It's a scene straight out of a medieval wellness brochure, if such a thing had ever existed. The air smells like wet stone, incense, and the kind of piety that comes from living on bread and herbal tea. You're greeted by Brother Anselm, who's got an impressive tonsure and a gentle smile that says, "You're safe here, as long as you don't ask too many questions about the wine cellar." He leads you through rows of perfectly manicured herbs, muttering Latin under his breath as he pinches leaves and gestures for you to sniff everything. Here, the Lord's mint, good for the stomach and for masking the taste of slightly off mutton, he says, tucking a sprig into your hand. You nod, desperately hoping this will fix whatever's wrong with you. Stomach cramps, anxiety, or just the general malaise of being alive in the Middle Ages. The monastery's herbalist, Brother Gervais, greets you next, holding a mortar and pestle the size of a small cannonball. He grinds up a mysterious blend, lavender, sage, something yellow and fuzzy, and stirs it into a cup of hot wine. "This will soothe your nerves," he says, "or at the very least make you forget why you needed soothing." You're ushered into a warm, smoky room lined with drying herbs and bundles of garlic hanging from the ceiling. The monks have an answer for every ailment: stomachache, peppermint tea with a splash of homemade mead. Insomnia, a mug of warm milk steeped with poppy seeds for peaceful dreams and a quiet night, unless you overdo it, in which case you'll have the dreams and skip the night entirely. For a cough, there's syrupy honey mixed with thyme and just enough brandy to burn away your sins. Every concoction is double blessed by Brother Benedict, who sprinkles holy water with such gusto that you feel healthier just from the splash zone. You sip, and your symptoms, real or imagined, fade into the background of gentle chanting, wood smoke, and the faint hope that you'll leave here with more teeth than you arrived with. There's a sense of security inside these stone walls. The monks have been making medicine for generations, writing down recipes in ink and illustrations so detailed they could pass for a medieval comic book. Their treatments seem practical and mystical all at once. If the herbs don't work, maybe the prayers will. And if the prayers don't work, at least the wine will. You hear tales of Brother Arnold's miracle poultice, a blend of yarrow, honey and faith, said to cure everything from boils to bad attitudes. Some visitors come just to buy a flask of the monk's famous herbal cordial, a beverage so strong it's said to make even the abbot giggle after vespers. Of course, the line between healing and hospitality gets blurry. The monks are generous with their cures, and even more generous with their spirits, for the health of the soul, as they say. You leave the infirmary with a basket of dried herbs, a bottle of holy tonic, and a gentle buzz that makes the outside world seem a little less threatening. Stepping back into daylight, you realize that monastic medicine is a blend of science, superstition, and social hour. The monks heal the body with herbs, the spirit with prayer, and the nerves with the medieval equivalent of a bottomless mimosa. As you wander home, pockets full of lavender and head full of good cheer, you're grateful for the monks, proof that sometimes the best medicine comes with a blessing, a smile, and just the right amount of booze. You've got a fever. The remedy? Wrap up in sweaty blankets, sniff some pungent herbs, and hope the evil spirits get bored. The room smells like rosemary and burnt animal fat. You're either going to sweat out the illness or invent aromatherapy by accident. The moment your temperature rises, the entire household kicks into crisis mode. Blankets are hauled from every bed, neighbor, and hayloft in town. You're bundled up until you resemble a root vegetable on market day, unable to move and sweating profusely. Everyone agrees. You must sweat it out, which, in medieval logic, is how you prove your body's still got the fight left in it. Resistance is futile. Complaining just earns you another layer. Someone, usually a well-meaning aunt, places a basin of steaming water under your nose, filled with a questionable blend of sage, rosemary, and something that might be wild onion, or might just be whatever she found by the well. You're ordered to inhale deeply. This is supposed to open your pores and drive out the bad vapors. Instead, it opens up every sinus you never knew you had, and makes your eyes water like you've been peeling onions during a thunderstorm. Meanwhile, the cure parade begins. First comes the herbal poultice, a warm compress slathered with mashed garlic, mustard seed, and perhaps a dash of lard for good measure. This is applied directly to your chest or feet, or both, if your family is feeling ambitious. The smell alone could keep away anything with a nose, including the Grim Reaper himself. A neighbor swings by with a charm, a pouch filled with dried marjoram, and maybe a lucky pebble to be tied around your neck for protection. The local wise woman throws salt on the hearth and mumbles a few words to confuse the spirits. You are now officially a medieval science experiment, with roughly the same chance of success as an early attempt at flying. When things get serious, it's time for drastic measures. Someone fires up a brazier, filling the room with thick, acrid smoke. You're encouraged to sweat even more, while your attendants wipe your forehead with vinegar-soaked rags. The theory is simple. If you suffer enough, surely the fever will give up and leave. If not, at least you'll be so exhausted you stop caring. Through it all, there's a persistent hope that the pungent aroma filling the house will not only drive out your fever, but also any evil entity within a 10-mile radius. The concoction bubbling on the fire, equal parts honey, fennel, and boiled chicken feet, is offered to you in a chipped mug. You sip it, mostly because resistance is impossible when you're pinned under 5 blankets and 3 superstitions. Even as you begin to hallucinate, was that a dancing goat, or just your cousin in a hat? Everyone around you is busy arguing about what actually works. One cousin swears by onions tucked into your armpits. Another suggests rubbing mint leaves behind your knees. Someone in the corner recommends prayer. You'd try it all, but you can barely move your arms. Eventually, either from the fever or the sheer weight of community effort, you slip into a fitful sleep. The room is still heavy with the scent of herbs, salt, and questionable animal fat. When you finally wake, you're greeted with cautious optimism. If the fever is gone, it's a miracle. If not, well, at least now you know what it's like to be both a baked potato and a human incense stick. In the end, medieval fever care is part family drama, part herbal chemistry, and part low-budget exorcism. Whether you actually get better or just pass out from dehydration, one thing's for sure. You'll never forget the smell of rosemary and burnt lard as long as you live, or at least as long as your blankets hold out. The Black Death is in town. Apothecaries scramble to make potions from rose petals, onions, and a dash of hope. You're told to drink vinegar, wear posies, and maybe dab a little ground emerald on your tongue, for luck. As soon as the first neighbor coughs, panic spreads faster than the plague itself. You're ordered to stay inside, but that just means everyone huddles together in the same stuffy cottage, sharing germs and stories of distant villages that definitely had it worse. The local apothecary, who you've never seen sober, let alone confident, appears at your door carrying a basket overflowing with herbs, dried flowers, and exactly one onion that's seen better centuries. Your first remedy is a thick, sour vinegar, which you're told will purge the evil. It tastes like disappointment and burns like a confession. You gulp it down because the alternative is listening to Aunt Mildred's theory that the disease only attacks people who haven't cleaned their chimneys this month. While you try not to cough, the apothecary grinds up rose petals and thyme, mixing them with honey and a prayer. This sticky blend is smeared under your nose, supposedly to ward off bad smells, and by medieval logic, the plague itself. You're now a walking bouquet, marinated in floral despair. The next stage of treatment is fashion-based, posies and nosegays. Everyone's wearing one, tucked in sleeves, hats, and occasionally their ears. It's both a medical strategy and a statement piece. Even the cows sport floral necklaces, just in case. The theory is simple. Nice smells beat bad air. Bad air carries the plague. Therefore, you must always smell like an accidental wedding. You've never felt so safe or so sneezy. There's a growing black market for miracle gems. The apothecary swears that a bit of ground emerald under the tongue keeps the fever away. You ask if this is true. He assures you that it's worked for everyone who can afford it. You settle for a pebble painted green, which is about as effective but less likely to chip a tooth. As you chew, you ponder if this is real medicine or just medieval performance art. If things get desperate, and they always do, it's time for a hot onion poultice tied to your chest or feet. Draws out the sickness, the apothecary says, or at least masks the smell of everything else. The only side effect is that no one wants to share a bed with you, but in a plague house, that's suddenly a major benefit. Some remedies are more creative. You're told to sit near a roaring fire and breathe deeply, which, depending on the size of your hovel, means you'll either sweat out the illness or invent the first Finnish sauna. Drinking boiled wine is also popular, provided you don't mind it tasting like regret and old boots. If your fever spikes, there's always the last resort cure. Shave a chicken, tie it to your foot, and hope for divine intervention. The chicken never recovers, but you feel oddly vindicated. Through it all, the apothecary remains optimistic. Desperate times, desperate drugs. He sighs, packing up his herbs for the next patient. You thank him, clutching your rose syrup, vinegar bottle, and what is definitely not a real emerald. He blesses you, the house, and, for good measure, the family goat. As the days pass, you watch the world outside through a curtain of posies and superstition. Maybe you'll get better, maybe you won't. Either way, You've experienced the full force of medieval medicine, part hope, part ritual, and a whole lot of onion, and so you settle into the endless days of quarantine, smelling like a floral salad, sipping vinegar, and placing your faith in anything, herbs, gems, prayers, or just the stubborn belief that somehow you'll survive. In medieval times, survival was half luck, half legend, and 100% desperate improvisation. Looking to spice things up? The local wise woman sells you a love potion. Ingredients: ground roots, honey, wine, and possibly ground up beetles. Results may vary. Side effects include unexpected marriage proposals from local goats. You approach her hut on a chilly dusk, feeling equal parts hopeful and desperate. Let's face it, medieval dating isn't easy when the local tavern's idea of flirting is a contest to see who can burp loudest. The wise woman, Esmeralda, meets you at the door, her hair adorned with wilted flowers and a suspiciously knowing smile. She ushers you inside with a wink, and the air is thick with the smell of honey, wild thyme, and a hint of something that might be burnt shoe leather. Esmeralda's shelves are cluttered with glass bottles, dried herbs, animal bones, and a large jar simply labeled "Good Luck." She listens to your romantic woes with the patience of someone who's heard it all. From "my sweetheart won't look at me" to "is it normal to develop feelings for the baker's horse?" She nods gravely, rummages in her basket, and pulls out a collection of earthy roots, a honeycomb chunk, and a handful of shiny beetles. "Every true love potion needs a secret ingredient," she whispers, tossing the beetles into her mortar. You try not to gag as she grinds everything together, adds a generous splash of homemade wine, and stirs until the whole mess bubbles with enthusiasm. She pours the mixture into a tiny, corked bottle and slides it across the table. "Mix with something sweet," she advises, "and only share with the one you desire. Unless you like surprises." The local gossip is full of stories about Esmeralda's potions. The baker who fell madly in love with his own reflection for 3 days. The blacksmith's wife who started serenading the town pig. The miller's apprentice who suddenly couldn't stop writing bad poetry. Some swear by her craft, others swear at her. Either way, you're holding the medieval equivalent of a romantic lottery ticket. And you're only mildly worried about the odds. You prepare to test the potion at the next village feast. When everyone is distracted by bad lute music and watery stew, you sneak a few drops into your chosen one's goblet, trying to act casual as you make small talk about weather, harvests, and the price of onions. Moments later, your beloved gazes your way. Is it working? Is that a glimmer of affection? Or just indigestion? You can't tell. The suspense is unbearable, at least until a passing goat stares at you with a new intensity. You wonder if you mixed up the bottles. As the evening drags on, you notice that the potion's effects are unpredictable at best. Some recipients become uncomfortably affectionate with the nearest barn animal. Others just giggle for hours or develop a sudden passion for collecting turnips. The wise woman's instructions did mention results may vary, and they do, from awkward to local legend. In rare cases, the potion does seem to spark genuine interest, leading to whirlwind romances, quick weddings, and the sort of dramatic arguments that keep village life entertaining through the winter. Meanwhile, Esmeralda's other aphrodisiacs include everything from spiced nuts and roasted parsnip to mysterious blue flowers best left unidentified. The theory is simple. If it tastes weird, it must be powerful. If it makes you sneeze, even better. You're told to recite a love poem while drinking for best effect. But if your rhymes are as bad as your luck, at least you'll be too tipsy to care. As the potion wears off, you're left with mixed results, a few new admirers, mostly four-legged, an interesting rash, and an experience you'll never confess to the village priest. Love in the Middle Ages is wild, confusing, and sometimes buggy, literally. But hey, at least you tried. After all, medieval romance isn't about finding the perfect partner. It's about surviving the potions, the gossip, and the goats. And if your true love can stick around after all that, you know it's real. Or at least, you know it's memorable. You sprained your ankle. The healer hands you willow bark to chew, a medieval aspirin. It tastes terrible but helps a little. If not, you're invited to bite a stick and scream into the hay until you feel better. Modern medicine. Eat your heart out. It's been a rough day. One careless step in the muddy lane, and now your ankle's the size of a well-fed rat. The healer, who moonlights as the town's only dentist, vet, and part-time exorcist, examines the swelling, clicks her tongue, and immediately prescribes nature's finest remedy. She snaps a strip of willow bark, waves it like a magic wand, and tells you to chew until you stop noticing the pain. Or anything else. You oblige. The bark is woody, fibrous, and tastes vaguely like disappointment. You chew, waiting for the ancient magic to kick in. The theory is that willow contains a pain-killing substance, salicin. But in 1373, the only proof is that the local woodcutter swears by it after chopping his thumb off. As you gnaw, you're serenaded by the comforting sounds of livestock, distant church bells, and your own internal monologue questioning all your life choices. If the willow doesn't do the trick, the next step is good, honest distraction. The healer hands you a stick, for biting, not for fighting, she clarifies, and encourages you to let out a nice, therapeutic scream. The barn acoustics are excellent for this, though the cows seem less impressed. You wonder if this is how medieval people measured pain. By decibel level, the louder you yell, the worse the injury. The goat with the limp is now your emotional support animal. For the more stoic patient, there's the walk-it-off method. You hobble a few steps, curse under your breath, and are told that pain builds character. There are rumors of tougher remedies for bigger problems. Poultices of mashed onion and garlic, heated bricks applied to the skin, or in especially severe cases, a gulp of strong ale followed by a group prayer. Anesthesia, in the medieval world, means hope you pass out before the barber gets here. Occasionally, a neighbor suggests herbal compresses. Comfrey leaves, wrapped in linen and tied tight around the ankle, promise to knit the bone. The local legend claims it works best if applied on a Tuesday while reciting the Lord's Prayer backwards. You try not to ask too many questions and just let the comfrey do its thing. At worst, you smell faintly of salad for the rest of the week. Children are sent running for any fresh dandelion, mint, or moss that looks vaguely medicinal. Someone always remembers a distant aunt who swears by rubbing a cut potato on the sore spot draws out the pain, they claim. You're not convinced, but at this point, you'll try anything that doesn't involve another bite of willow. The village's most advanced option is let's wait and see. If the swelling goes down, everyone nods wisely and takes credit. If it gets worse, the barber is called in to discuss more dramatic options. Splints made from whatever's lying around, slings crafted from the Lord's old curtains, or, in the worst-case scenario, a pep talk about being grateful you've got another leg. By evening, you're propped up in a hayloft with your ankle wrapped in enough cloth to start a small flag factory. You've been given an herbal draft for the pain, honey, vinegar, maybe a splash of cider if you're lucky. The healer pats your head, says you're tough as old boots, and tells you to rest. You try to relax, ignoring the throbbing, the taste of willow, and the knowledge that in another life you'd be arguing with your insurance instead. In medieval pain management, hope and stubbornness are your greatest assets. If nothing else, you've gained a new respect for willow trees, and for the art of screaming into a bale of hay with dignity. The village priest insists your illness is spiritual. The cure, confession, holy water, and maybe a slap with a wet palm frond. Some people swear by it. Others just swear. It starts the way it always does. You sneeze at Sunday Mass, and suddenly Sister Agnes is giving you the side eye. The next day, word's gotten round that you're unwell, which in medieval terms could mean anything from a fever to a minor case of demonic possession. The town healer shrugs and tells you to see Father Bartholomew, who's been waiting his whole career for a really juicy medical mystery. You limp to the chapel, clutching your stomach and your dignity, and enter the world of medieval spiritual medicine. Father Bartholomew greets you at the altar, already waving a censer like he's trying to smoke out a nest of wasps. "We must address the root cause," he intones. "All sickness comes from sin, or at the very least, insufficient tithes. You're invited to confess your every wrongdoing. From that time you stole a turnip as a child to your questionable thoughts about the cobbler's apprentice. The more you confess, the more confident the priest becomes that he's getting closer to the cure, even if you're pretty sure your sore throat has nothing to do with coveting your neighbor's goat. After a lengthy confession, Father Bartholomew leads you to a side room filled with candles, relics, and a suspiciously large barrel of holy water. You're doused liberally, just to be safe. The water is cold, cleansing, and slightly gritty, possibly because the church roof leaks. He hands you a palm frond, instructs you to repent with vigor, and gives your shoulder a mild whack for good measure. Sometimes the evil must be startled, he explains. You wonder if it worked, or if you're just now wet and confused. The priest recommends a strict regimen of prayers, morning, noon, and night, with a little extra for good luck. The theory is simple. If you bombard heaven with enough Hail Marys, eventually God will get tired and just heal you for peace and quiet. You're given a list of saints to petition: Street Blaze for throats, Street Roche for plagues, and Street Jude for lost causes, which now seems like a subtle hint. Next comes the relic tour. Father Bartholomew brings out everything from a splinter said to be from the true cross to a shoe once worn by an obscure martyr. You're told to touch, kiss, or at least gaze reverently at each one. Faith is the best medicine, he says. You nod, but privately wish for a bit of willow bark and a nap. As days pass, the spiritual therapy continues. The priest visits your bedside to sprinkle more holy water, mutter Latin, and ask awkward questions about your soul's readiness for the afterlife. Neighbors drop in to pray loudly and occasionally recommend even stranger cures. Carrying a candle blessed by 3 monks, fasting until the fever leaves, or sleeping with a psalm under your pillow. For many, this is a comfort. The priest's rituals bring a sense of hope and order to the chaos of illness. For others, it's just another layer of suffering, especially when the holy water starts to chafe. If you do get better, Father Bartholomew credits the power of prayer. If not, well, it was probably God's will, or maybe you missed a step in the repentance process. Eventually, you recover, either from the fever or from the exhaustion of so much spiritual attention. You're welcomed back to church with extra incense and a pointed look from Sister Agnes. Your soul is lighter, your conscience cleaner, and you now have a healthy respect for the healing powers of guilt and repetition. In medieval times, faith and medicine are 2 sides of the same battered coin. Whether or not you actually feel better, at least you're now thoroughly confessed, slightly damp, and a little less likely to sneeze in public. Sometimes, a good prayer and a splash of holy water are just what the doctor, or in this case, the priest, ordered. You attend a village festival. Someone brings out bread laced with ergot, a mold that causes wild hallucinations and spontaneous dancing. Hours later, half the village is prancing through the streets and nobody remembers why. Was it a drug? Was it the devil? Who's to say? It starts innocently enough. A harvest celebration, barrels of weak ale, a suspiciously lively fiddle, and tables groaning under the weight of freshly baked rye bread. After months of bland pottage and sadness, everyone's ready for a feast. Even if the bread looks like it's seen better days and the color is not quite right. No one cares. In medieval Europe, bread is bread. If you start asking questions, you'll just end up hungry. You grab a hunk and dig in, only vaguely aware of a bitter aftertaste. By the time you notice, everyone else is 2 slices deep and the village's least talented musician is leading a round of greensleeves at a tempo that should probably be illegal. There's a sudden energy in the air, laughter, clapping, a group of farmers forming an impromptu conga line. You chalk it up to festival spirit and perhaps too much cider, but then the real fun begins. One by one, villagers start twitching, swaying, and finally breaking out into wild, frenzied dancing. The baker's wife attempts a somersault. Old man Piers, who hasn't moved faster than a crawl since the last plague, is now spinning with the enthusiasm of a maypole in a windstorm. The priest tries to intervene, but is swept into the madness, waving his hat and declaring a holiday in the name of Street Vitus, the unofficial patron saint of unexplained boogieing. As the hours pass, the line between celebration and chaos blurs. Some villagers burst into fits of giggles while others weep at the beauty of the moon. The village square becomes a swirling mass of elbows, knees, and wild declarations of undying love for cheese. You notice that the bread left on the table has grown fuzzy with a purple-black mold. Someone shrugs and eats another piece. At first, everyone assumes it's just the excitement of harvest. But as dusk falls and the dancing continues, concern creeps in. Feet are blistered, voices are hoarse, and nobody can seem to stop, even when they want to. The town healer, herself mid-jig, mutters something about bad bread and unbalanced humours, then trips over a stray chicken and continues dancing on all fours. Eventually, a few sober souls piece things together. Ergot, a mold that grows on rye, is the culprit. It contains powerful alkaloids, causing everything from muscle spasms to visions of talking animals. Essentially, a medieval acid trip. The symptoms? Uncontrollable movements, hallucinations, and an overwhelming urge to dance until you collapse. In modern times, doctors call it ergotism. In medieval Europe, it's called being cursed, or, if you're lucky, just another Tuesday. Rumors fly. Maybe the festival was bewitched. Maybe someone angered a saint. Maybe the rye field grew too close to the witch's garden. Theories abound, but no one really wants to admit they've been bested by bread. Instead, tales of the dancing plague are passed down for generations, embellished until no one remembers the truth. Was it the mold, the music, or just the desperate need to feel alive in a world full of fleas and fear? The next morning, the village awakens to sore muscles, foggy memories, and a healthy skepticism toward anything that isn't thoroughly toasted. The priest preaches a fiery sermon on moderation. The baker promises to inspect his grain more closely, while the healer stocks up on holy water, just in case. A single, half-eaten loaf sits abandoned in the field, a silent witness to the night the village discovered the powerful, unpredictable effects of accidental medieval drugs. In the end, you learn a valuable lesson. Never trust festival bread. And if you find yourself dancing with the priest and a goat at 3 a.m., maybe just blame the ergo and let the good times roll until your feet give out. Some healers use hemp seeds and cannabis for pain and anxiety. It's not legal, but it's not illegal either. Just another plant in the medicine chest. You sip a hemp infusion and suddenly feel much more interested in medieval ceiling patterns. It starts innocently enough. You're feeling anxious, twitchy, and convinced your neighbor's rooster is plotting against you. Medieval life is hard on the nerves, what with plagues, famines, and the constant threat of stepping in something unspeakable. So, you shuffle to the village healer, hoping for a little relief. She gives you a sly smile, rummages in her apothecary bag, and produces a jar of tiny brown seeds and a cloth pouch with a familiar, earthy aroma. Hemp and cannabis, known for generations as useful for making rope, soothing sore muscles, and occasionally inspiring someone to write 37 verses about a particularly attractive potato. The healer grinds the seeds, adds a pinch of dried leaf, and steeps it all in a pot of hot water. For the nerves, she whispers, handing you a cup. You inhale. It smells faintly of grass, clippings, and mystery. Your first sip is surprisingly mild, with a nutty aftertaste and a subtle, lingering calm. The world softens at the edges. The children screaming in the lane sound less like demons and more like slightly annoying birds. You stretch out on a wooden bench, eyes drifting to the intricate wooden beams above. Suddenly, the patterns seem fascinating. Is that a horse or just an oddly shaped knot? Either way, you feel calmer than you have in weeks. Medieval cannabis use is an open secret. Healers recommend it for everything from back pain and bad tempers to melancholia and minor existential crises. It's never officially endorsed by the church, but you notice even the local priest has a curious fondness for herbal tea on stressful days. Some folks say hemp oil works wonders for aching joints and the sort of headaches you get after 3 hours of listening to Uncle Edgar's opinions about turnip farming. You hear tales of hemp fields hidden on the edge of the village, carefully tended by women who know the difference between medicine and having a really good afternoon. Recipes are passed in whispers: hemp butter for the baker, cannabis compresses for the midwife, the occasional poppy and hemp cordial for nights when you'd rather not dream at all. The risk? Not much, unless someone accuses you of witchcraft or hoarding too many happy thoughts. The effects vary, but most people agree. After a cup or two, life's worries fade into the background. The pigs grunting in the yard sound almost musical. Your neighbor's constant complaints about his goat's love life become deeply philosophical. Even your mother-in-law's opinions seem tolerable for at least an hour. Occasionally, a little too much leads to hilarity. The last village fair saw 3 men debating whether ducks dream in color for over 2 hours, fueled by a batch of extra-strong hemp cordial. A wandering friar once spent an afternoon giggling at clouds after accidentally eating hempseed cake. These incidents are written off as God's mysterious ways, or, if particularly embarrassing, just the effects of bad cheese. Of course, not everyone is a fan. The Lord's steward looks down on such peasant indulgence, while his own steward is known to sneak a hemp poultice for his back every time he hauls the tax chest. In a world where true relaxation is rare, even a little relief feels like a miracle. If it comes in the form of a bitter herbal tea, all the better. As the sun sets, you rise from the bench feeling lighter, less worried, and with a profound appreciation for medieval joinery. The healer pats your shoulder, slips you a pouch of seeds for later, and tells you to drink whenever the world feels heavy or the livestock get judgmental. In medieval Europe, cannabis and hemp aren't just plants, they're sanity savers. When life gets overwhelming, the answer is sometimes as simple as a cup of herbal tea, a deep breath, and a moment spent marveling at the ceiling you're about to have a tooth pulled. The barber surgeon hands you a soporific sponge, cloth soaked in poppy, mandrake and hemlock, then dried. You breathe it in. You wake up hours later, minus 1 tooth and most of your dignity. It begins with a dull ache and the suspicion that your tooth is plotting against you. Every cold sip, every bite of stale bread sends a jolt through your jaw, reminding you that in medieval times, dental hygiene is a distant dream. Your options are limited: chew a clove and hope, or visit the barber, surgeon and pray. You opt for the latter, if only because your friends are tired of your pained groaning and you've started naming your tooth so throbs a lot. The barber surgeon, a multitasker whose skills include haircuts, bloodletting, and casual amputation, welcomes you with a gap-toothed grin and a table full of tools that look like torture devices rejected by the Inquisition. He offers you his newest innovation, the soporific sponge, a miracle of modern science, he boasts, holding up what is essentially a rag that's seen too much. It smells like a perfumery exploded in a graveyard. You're told to inhale deeply. No matter what you do, don't stop. The sponge is rumored to be soaked in every sedative known to the medieval world: poppy for sleep, mandrake for dreamless slumber, hemlock for courage, or possibly paralysis, and maybe just a splash of wine for flavor. Count to 20, he says. You don't make it past 7. The world spins, Your tongue grows heavy, and suddenly, nothing matters, not even the fact that the last person to try this is still recovering from a haircut gone wrong. Somewhere in the haze, you hear the scraping of metal, the muttered Latin, and the gentle encouragements of the barber surgeon. Almost there. Just a little twist. Try not to scream. The pain is distant. A dull memory trapped behind a wall of herbal fog. You float, dreaming of fields of poppies and shoes that fit, only to wake up with a gap in your teeth and a vague suspicion you've been on a brief holiday from reality. The soporific sponge is medieval anesthesia at its finest. No needles, no precise dosages, just a rough guess, a leap of faith, and the hope that you'll wake up on the right side of the grass. Success is measured by whether you come out the other end with fewer complaints than you went in. In rare cases, the sponge works so well that the patient sleeps through the rest of the week and sometimes their own birthday. You sit up, groggy, and take inventory. Tooth. Gone. Pride. Missing in action. Dignity. Last seen somewhere around the second sniff. The barber surgeon offers you a cup of weak ale and a soft pat on the back, telling you to rinse, spit, and avoid anything crunchy for a month or two. He's already scrubbing the tools for his next appointment, a man who thinks he has too much blood and not enough luck. In the village, the soporific sponge becomes the stuff of legend. Some swear by its effectiveness. Others tell cautionary tales. The woman who dreamed she was a duck for 3 days. The tanner who woke up with a missing tooth and a full beard. The priest who accidentally blessed the sponge and then napped through Sunday Mass. You stagger home, mouth numb and brain buzzing, and collapse into bed. Was it painless? Not exactly. But in a world where pain is inevitable and dignity optional, you're just grateful the worst is over. You nurse your sore jaw. Avoid all hard bread. And practice your new, slightly lopsided smile in the looking glass. And if your next tooth starts to ache, you'll know what to do, just as soon as you're brave enough to face that sponge again. In medieval medicine, the cure is sometimes stranger than the illness, and anesthesia is just another word for good luck, and see you on the other side. Feeling sick? The doctor tastes your pee, consults the stars, and declares you to have excess choler. Your prescription: less garlic, more saffron, and a brisk walk at sunrise. You begin to suspect he's making this up. In the Middle Ages, falling ill means your fate is in the hands of a man whose medical diploma is written in Latin and whose real specialty is making confident guesses. You drag yourself to his door, pale, shivering, and ready for answers. Instead, you're handed a clay pot and told to fill it to the brim. No further instructions, no dignity spared. Congratulations, you've just been enrolled in the world's oldest and least appetizing lab test. The doctor, usually wearing a hat that's 3 sizes too big for his head, holds your sample up to the light like a jewel thief appraising a ruby. He sniffs it, swirls it, and, yes, takes a cautious sip. The look on his face says it all. He's committed to the bit. A fine vintage. He mumbles, notes of rye, hints of turnip, and just a suggestion of melancholy. You wonder if he secretly prefers beer. If urine tasting isn't enough, the next step is astrology. The doctor pulls out an almanac, covered in smudges, stars, and questionable math. He asks your birthday, the time you first felt ill, and, if you're lucky, stops short of inquiring about your favorite color. He plots your diagnosis according to planetary alignments, the position of the moon, and possibly how annoyed his wife was that morning. If Mars is rising, it's fiery humors. If Saturn is lurking, you're probably doomed. Either way, you're in for an uncomfortable conversation about the imbalance within. Diagnostics don't stop there. The doctor examines your tongue, checks the color of your eyes, and asks when you last dreamt of fish, because in medieval logic, this somehow relates to your liver. He takes your pulse, counts to 7, and declares you of a sanguine temperament, but cursed with sluggish spleen. He says it with such authority that you almost believe it. Even if you have no idea what a spleen does, Your prescription is, as always, a mix of the obvious and the outlandish. Less garlic, he insists, as if that's even possible in a village where garlic is the only seasoning anyone can afford. More saffron, he adds, knowing full well saffron costs more than your house. Then, for good measure, a brisk walk at sunrise. You nod solemnly, already planning to ignore at least 2/3 of this advice. There's also a ritual component. The doctor recommends wearing a sprig of rosemary pinned to your tunic for protection against bad airs. If you're still sick after a week, try reciting a psalm backward while standing on one foot. Sometimes the spirits just need convincing, he says with a wink. You leave his hut clutching your instructions and wondering if medieval medicine is simply an elaborate prank. But it's not all wild guesses. There's comfort in the process. Someone listens, pokes, prods, and pronounces you treatable. You're given a chance to believe you're doing something about your suffering. Even if doing something means drinking tea made from moss and hoping Mercury exits retrograde, occasionally the doctor gets it right. You cut back on garlic, add a splash of parsley to your soup, and by some miracle, you do start to feel better. Other times, you realize you were just dehydrated and, after all the tests and star charts, you probably needed a nap and a good meal. Medieval diagnostics are part science, part superstition, and mostly theatre. Still, you return home with hope, a handful of strange herbs, and the satisfaction of knowing your pee is, at the very least, an excellent conversation starter. In the end, you learn 2 valuable lessons. Always keep your birth chart handy, and never ask your doctor for a second opinion unless you're ready to hear more about your spleen. You wander into the tavern for advice. Local wisdom says to drink warm ale, rub garlic on your feet, and sleep with a potato under your pillow. Oddly, this sometimes works, possibly because you're too confused to remember your symptoms. It's late afternoon, and the tavern is buzzing. Half the village is inside, sheltering from bad weather, bad harvests, and bad marriages. The air is thick with the scent of sour ale, wood smoke, and at least 3 kinds of mystery stew. You sidle up to the bar, clutching your aching side, and prepare to hear the best free medical advice money can't buy. The innkeeper is your first consultant. He's seen it all, from turnip-induced indigestion to cases of overly ambitious cheese. His cure for everything is a pint of his strongest ale, served slightly above room temperature. It'll chase away the chills and most of your regrets, he assures you. You drink, partly out of politeness, partly because your alternatives are worse. The warmth soothes your throat, dulls the pain, and blurs the details of why you came here in the first place. Next to you sits old Molly, self-appointed expert in folk cures and local gossip. She leans over, breath heavy with onions, and tells you to rub garlic on your feet before bed. Draws the sickness out through your soles, she claims, wagging a finger. No one's sure where this idea started, but the smell alone will keep everyone, including illness, at bay. You promise to try it, knowing full well that tomorrow, the only thing you'll have lost is friends. A group of regulars chime in. If the garlic doesn't work, try a hot stone wrapped in a sock under your pillow. Or better yet, a potato. The theory is that the potato will absorb your fever overnight. There are tales of miraculous recoveries, and also tales of waking up to find someone has stolen your breakfast. One old-timer claims he once used a turnip and ended up dreaming about flying pigs. You decide to keep an open mind, and maybe a spare potato. The resident drunk, who claims to be an apothecary on Tuesdays, sidles over and offers his services. He smells like a distillery, but his advice is oddly compelling. Mix equal parts ale, vinegar, and honey. Drink it fast, and if you don't feel better, you'll at least feel different. He hands you a cup filled with something brown and fizzy. You drink, and the world tilts. But so does your pain. Maybe he's onto something. Or maybe you're just dizzy. If you're unlucky, Someone suggests the classic sweat cure: bundle up in every spare cloak, sit by the fire, and drink mulled ale until you glow. Eventually, you either sweat out the illness or the will to get up. The local theory: if you're hot enough, nothing can survive inside you, not even your symptoms. You wonder if this is the root of the medieval sauna. A few patrons recommend the healing song, a raucous, off-key tune about lost sheep and better days. Supposedly, singing scares off bad spirits and, if nothing else, distracts you from your aches. You try, but your voice cracks and the tavern erupts in applause. You realize, with a sort of warm resignation, that embarrassment may be the most powerful medicine of all. As night falls, the advice keeps coming. You're told to tie a red ribbon around your wrist, eat 3 walnuts before sunrise, and, in truly desperate cases, ask the barmaid for a special tonic. No one will say what's in it, but everyone agrees it should only be tried once. You stumble home with a pocket full of garlic, a head full of conflicting instructions, and the vague feeling that you might actually feel a little better. Or maybe it's just the ale talking. You tuck the potato under your pillow, drift off to sleep, and dream of dancing turnips and singing sheep. In the end, tavern remedies aren't about science. They're about hope, distraction, and community spirit. And maybe, just maybe, a little confusion is the best cure of all. Some remedies are banned. Wise women and secretive healers pass around forbidden recipes. Belladonna eye drops, henbane tea, mugwort for vivid dreams. Use at your own risk. Witchcraft accusations not included, but highly likely. It's midnight, and you find yourself at the edge of the village, following a crooked path lit only by the moon and your own questionable decision-making. You're searching for relief, the kind that doesn't involve a priest, a barber, or anyone likely to bleed you for balance. Word has it there's a healer out here with remedies you won't find at the market or in the local jail. You duck into a hut hidden behind a tangle of elderberry bushes. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of dried herbs, old secrets, and the lingering suspicion that you should have left your shoes outside. The wise woman greets you, hair wild, eyes sharp, voice as soft as moss. She's stirring something in a blackened cauldron, a potion that bubbles like a conversation you're not supposed to overhear. She gestures for you to sit. There's no small talk here. You're shown a table crowded with vials and jars, each carefully labeled in a language that might be Latin, or might just be terrible handwriting. She warns you, these aren't for the faint of heart or the easily caught. If the Lord's steward finds belladonna on you, best have a good story, or fast feet. You listen as she explains the underground menu. Belladonna, also called deadly nightshade, is mixed into tiny drops for the eyes. Legend says it makes your gaze irresistible, your vision strange, and, if you overdo it, your future very short. Henbane is for special tea, a brew known for causing dreams so vivid you might not return from them entirely. Mugwort, meanwhile, is wrapped in cloth and tucked under your pillow to summon messages from the other side, or just nightmares with better special effects. Some customers want healing, relief from pain, insomnia, or the kind of heartache no willow bark can touch. Others want a taste of power, a glimpse beyond the curtain, or just a break from the daily grind of feudal misery. Whatever the need, there's a plant for that. If you're willing to risk a visit from the village constable, or worse, the church's witchfinder with his book of ways to test for sorcery, the wise woman works quickly and quietly. She grinds, stirs, and wraps your purchase in a scrap of linen. She tells you to use it sparingly. Too much belladonna, and you'll see the world upside down. Too much henbane, and you'll spend Sunday in the duck pond. There's always an edge to her voice, a reminder that even the best medicine can become a curse in the wrong hands or the wrong gossip's mouth. Back in the village, people talk. The baker's wife is walking around with suspiciously dilated pupils. The miller's apprentice claims he dreamed the winning dice rolls for the next month. A certain local knight is rumoured to owe his courage and his love life to a handful of dried mugwort leaves. And every now and then, someone disappears for a week, returning with wild stories of dancing with fairies or riding on the wind. Just a bit of mugwort in the shoes, they claim. Nothing supernatural at all. Of course, danger comes with every dose. A single accusation, one jealous neighbour, one nosy priest, and suddenly your nighttime search for relief becomes evidence at a trial. Witchcraft, they say, is just medicine that works too well, or makes you smile at the wrong time. The wise woman knows this. She keeps her recipes hidden, her remedies wrapped in silence and secrecy, trading only with those she trusts not to shout when things get weird. In the end, you leave with a small pouch, a pounding heart, and the knowledge that magic and medicine are often one and the same. You tuck your remedy deep in your cloak and walk home under the watchful stars, grateful for the herbal underground, and for the wisdom to never tell anyone exactly where you found it. Got a wound? The apothecary slaps on a poultice of bread, lard, and random herbs. It draws out infection or invites more. Either way, you're left wrapped in crusty bread and hope. It's not the worst injury you've ever had, but it's definitely the squishiest. You show up at the apothecary's hut, blood oozing from your shin, with the proud limp of someone who tripped over their own confidence. The apothecary doesn't ask what happened. They've seen it all. Axe wounds, sheep bites, even the occasional jousting accident involving a very surprised duck. What matters now is how much bread you can spare for healing. Out comes the medicinal loaf, a chunk of yesterday's bread, now rock hard and with the unmistakable aroma of feet. The apothecary crumbles it into a bowl, adds a healthy scoop of lard, for moisture they claim, and stirs in whatever herbs are in season. Today, it's thyme, dandelion, and a sprig of something you suspect is just grass. They mash it together until it looks like the world's saddest stuffing. The poultice is slapped onto your wound with the enthusiasm of someone frosting a cake, then wrapped in a strip of cloth so stained you're not sure what color it started as. The theory is simple. The bread will draw out the bad humors, the herbs will fight the spirits, and the lard will keep everything stuck together and maybe attract every dog within a 3-mile radius. You're sent home with strict instructions. Don't unwrap the bandage for 3 days. Avoid getting it wet, impossible since it's raining. And, above all, do not scratch. If you feel a tingling sensation, that's either healing or the early stages of something you shouldn't Google. You hobble back to your cottage, leaving a trail of crumbs and wounded pride. Of course, the bread poultice is just the beginning. For more stubborn wounds, the apothecary offers variations: mashed onions and garlic for extra sting, honey if you're lucky, or rich, or a dollop of goose fat for really stubborn infections. Some remedies call for wine-soaked bandages, which are mostly just an excuse to use wine for something other than forgetting your troubles. There's also a universal salve made from pig's ear, beeswax, and a whisper of parsley. The recipe has been in the family for generations, or at least since last Tuesday. The logic behind these treatments is a blend of experience, hope, and the belief that if it stinks enough, it must be working. Medieval folk swear by poultices. They soften boils, soothe burns, and occasionally turn small wounds into large, impressive scars perfect for storytelling. You quickly discover that having a visible bandage means you get out of chores, sympathy from the neighbors, and, if you're lucky, an extra slice of actual bread with dinner. Still, not every outcome is heroic. Sometimes, the poultice just creates a breeding ground for new mysteries. You unwrap the bandage after a week and discover either miraculous healing or a new kind of mold. The apothecary just shrugs and offers to try again, this time with yesterday's leftover pottage. Despite the risks, the ritual of plastering on a poultice brings comfort, a moment of hands-on care in a world where most medicine involves prayer, fear, and biting something hard. The warm, slightly squishy weight of bread and lard is oddly reassuring, like being hugged by a very greasy loaf. So you limp on, wrapped in bread, bandages, and a healthy dose of medieval optimism. After all, the best medicine is the one you have on hand. And if it leaves you smelling like a bakery, at least you know you'll never be lonely for long. You develop a cough that scares even the local priest. The healer gives you a sticky syrup made from honey, thyme, and anything vaguely sweet. You spend the night coughing, sticky, and wondering if you're actually just being preserved for later. It all starts with a tickle in your throat. A harmless irritation, you think, until you let out a cough so thunderous that the neighbor's chickens stop laying eggs for a week. The healer is summoned, her arrival heralded by the scent of burnt sugar and stern warnings about bad humors. She listens to your cough, peers down your throat with a wooden spoon, and declares, "That's a nasty one. You'll need something stronger than prayer." Out comes her collection of sticky jars and mysterious pots. She brews a syrup in her smoky hearth, tossing in fistfuls of thyme, a suspicious amount of wildflower honey, and any fruit she can lay her hands on. If it's in season, it's going in the pot, apples, pears, even an old plum or two. For added strength, she stirs in a generous spoonful of molasses and a drizzle of mead. The mixture bubbles away until the whole cottage smells like the inside of a beehive. Once cooled, she pours the syrup into a cup and hands it to you with strict instructions. Sip slowly, no matter how desperate you feel. You take a cautious taste. It's delicious, but so sticky that it clings to your tongue like medieval wallpaper paste. Each swallow leaves your lips glued together, but the honey soothes your burning throat. The thyme burns just enough to remind you that you're alive, and possibly to banish any lingering evil spirits still clinging to your lungs. If the syrup doesn't do the trick, she moves on to electuaries, a medieval form of cough drop, if you like your remedies rolled in flour and made from things found at the bottom of your pantry. Dried herbs and ground seeds are mashed with honey into a sticky paste, then shaped into balls and coated with powdered sugar or crushed breadcrumbs. You're told to suck on one slowly for as long as you can stand it, which turns out to be about 5 seconds before you start coughing again and almost choke on the thing. Not content to let you suffer alone, the healer offers even more advice. Sleep with a linen cloth soaked in camphor oil around your neck. Rub your chest with warm goose fat. Bonus points if the goose is still squawking nearby. For extra effectiveness, try inhaling the steam from a pot of boiled nettles. If all else fails, hang a string of onions around your bed. Good for the lungs, bad for romance. As night falls, you find yourself swaddled in honey, wrapped in camphor, and surrounded by enough onions to season the village stew. You cough, you wheeze, and you resign yourself to a night of medieval self-preservation. Between the syrup and the electuary, you're so thoroughly coated in sugar that you worry you'll wake up to find yourself on a bakery shelf. The next morning, you emerge sticky, groggy, and with a cough that's slightly less dramatic, though you're not sure if it's the medicine or sheer exhaustion. The healer congratulates you on surviving the night and suggests you drink a little more syrup just in case. You do, partly because you're too tired to argue, and partly because your tongue still hasn't figured out how to say no. As you trudge through your day, leaving faintly sticky fingerprints everywhere, you realize medieval medicine is half comfort, half trial by honey. And if you're not cured, at least you're sweet enough that no one will mind sitting next to you at supper, unless, of course, they're allergic to thyme. You're about to give birth. The midwife hands you a cup of spiced wine and tells you to breathe. There's chanting, herbs, and someone muttering about St. Margaret. If you survive, you get a hearty slap on the back and a warning not to do it again soon. It begins with a groan and a chorus of voices. The midwife barking instructions your mother-in-law, offering unhelpful advice, and your neighbor Agnes peering through the window just to check. The room is crowded, smoky, and smells faintly of sweat, sage, and the kind of nervous anticipation usually reserved for livestock auctions. There's no privacy, just a semicircle of concerned faces and the family goat who's wandered in hoping for spilled milk. The midwife, a woman with arms like tree branches and the calm of someone who's seen everything twice, takes charge. She wraps your belly in warm cloths, thrusts a bundle of mugwort under your nose, and encourages you to breathe deep, like you're blowing out a candle at the harvest feast. For pain, you're offered the medieval trifecta: a sip of spiced wine, a chewed clove, and a wooden spoon to bite. Modern medicine hasn't been invented yet, but improvisation certainly has. Someone starts chanting prayers to Saint Margaret, patroness of childbirth and anyone needing a small miracle. In the background, a friend waves a dried herb bundle over your head for luck and easy passage. The atmosphere hovers somewhere between a religious service and a cooking lesson. There's a lot of shouting, sweating, and the occasional sudden urge to blame your partner for everything that's ever gone wrong. Labor is less a medical event and more a community drama. The midwife checks your progress with an expertise born from decades of experience and maybe a little superstition. Every so often, she sprinkles holy water on the sheets, mutters about moon phases, and instructs someone to fetch another pail of hot water. No one knows exactly why, but it feels important to keep the water coming just in case the baby is thirsty on arrival. For comfort, you're handed a chunk of bread soaked in wine and told to focus on the flickering candle at the foot of the bed. If you scream, you're praised for your strength. If you're quiet, they assume you've fainted and poke you with a spoon. In between contractions, you're offered sips of wine, herbal infusions, and endless encouragement from women who've survived this ordeal many times before and aren't shy about sharing every grisly detail. When the moment finally arrives, it's loud, messy, and miraculous. The midwife wraps the newborn in linen, gives you a hearty slap on the back to remind you you're still alive, and hands over your screaming, squirming prize. There's relief, exhaustion, and a sudden craving for a bath that you know won't happen for at least another season. Everyone breathes a collective sigh, except the goat, who's just discovered the bread. If you survive, and let's be honest, it's always a coin toss in medieval Europe, you're celebrated as a hero. The priest is summoned for blessings. The neighbors arrive with gifts: a stale loaf, a wilted onion, and, if you're lucky, a tiny silver charm against the evil eye. Someone suggests you rest, but that's a joke. Now you have a baby to feed, a family to greet, and a list of chores that somehow got longer while you were busy not dying. In the end, medieval childbirth is equal parts bravery, chaos, and community theatre. There's no epidural, just wine and willpower. And if you make it through, you've earned the right to be a little dramatic for the next month. Or, at the very least, demand breakfast in bed, preferably somewhere the goat can't find you. Finally, we come to the inevitable. Sometimes the cure is worse than the disease. People overdose on poppy juice, misidentify mushrooms, or just eat the wrong root. You wake up grateful to be alive, or at least alive enough to tell your grandkids why you don't trust doctors with too many teeth. It starts with the best intentions. You have a headache, a rash, or a cough that could wake the dead. The village apothecary, healer, or local wise woman hands you a vial, a leaf, or a miracle mushroom. The instructions are clear as mud. Just a pinch, never on an empty stomach. Or, don't mix with ale unless you're feeling lucky. You nod, smile, and promptly forget half of what you've just heard. Take the poppy juice, for example. A drop calms your nerves. 2 drops put you to sleep, and 3 drops put you in the running for an early audience with the saints. Medieval dosing is mostly guesswork. Sometimes you wake up after a gentle nap. Other times you wake up 3 days later, confused, hungry, and clutching a shoe that isn't yours. If you're very unlucky, you don't wake up at all, giving the local priest another chance to deliver his favorite sermon about moderation, and the dangers of trusting anything that grows near a graveyard. Then there's the mushroom situation. For every edible fungus, there are 3 that promise visions, stomach trouble, or an urgent trip to the outhouse if you make it that far. The line between delicacy and bad trip is thin, and medieval foragers are nothing if not optimistic. The neighbor who found a patch of miracle caps behind the compost heap is now convinced he spoke with angels. But he also spent a week speaking only in rhyme and asking the chickens for advice. Roots and herbs are a whole other gamble. The wise woman offers you something for your fever. Maybe it's angelica root. Maybe it's the thing that made the last patient see colors for a month. If it stings your tongue, it's probably working. If it numbs your whole mouth, well, maybe take a nap and hope for the best. The healer reminds you that a little pain means it's healing, but you're not sure if that applies to medicine or medieval marriage. Overdoses are a group activity. The word spreads fast when someone has a reaction. The baker's son saw his own future after drinking too much poppy cordial, and the blacksmith's apprentice is now convinced he can talk to geese. The priest is called in to pray, the healer is called in to deny all responsibility, and the patient is called in to explain if they ever wake up. The village, ever resourceful, makes a note. Maybe next time, just chew on a stick. Even the safe cures aren't always safe. Vinegar gargles can take the enamel off your teeth. Honey mixed with garlic sometimes works, but it sometimes just leaves you unpopular at feasts. The bread poultice, if left too long, has been known to attract a small army of ants, and an ill-timed herbal steam bath has sent more than one patient outside, gasping for air and dignity. In medieval times, the art of survival is equal parts luck, stubbornness, and a refusal to quit experimenting. The greatest medical innovation? Not dying. The greatest medical tradition? Passing on your hard-earned cautionary tales to the next generation, preferably over a tankard of ale and with plenty of dramatic hand gestures. You wake up, battered but wiser, with a new respect for moderation, and for the old farmer who always said, "Don't trust a doctor who carries more herbs than teeth." You promise yourself you'll stick to simple remedies next time, like warm water, gentle prayers, or just waiting it out. But deep down, you know that when the next ache or pain strikes, you'll be right back at the healer's door, ready for another round of medieval roulette. After all, what's the point of surviving if you don't get a story out of it? You wake up feeling stuck. The wise woman shrugs, hands you a steaming cup of goat's milk mixed with honey, and a pinch of whatever plant she claims is gentle on the gut. 15 minutes later, you're running for the nearest hedgerow. In medieval times, a good laxative was worth its weight in silver, and any digestive complaint could be solved with the right mixture, or make you consider a career change in plumbing. It's not that you have many options. Medieval cuisine isn't exactly fiber-rich, unless you count the accidental hay that falls into your stew. Bread is dense, vegetables are scarce, and the average serving of meat comes with a side of "please chew carefully, there's still a feather." So when things stop moving, you turn to the only true authority in the village, the wise woman with her endless jars, sharp eyes, and zero patience for anyone who doesn't trust her methods. She listens to your troubles, clucks her tongue, and promises her special remedy. Into the pot goes a generous pour of goat's milk, fresh from the source and possibly still warm. In goes the honey, thick and golden to help the medicine go down, and because nothing is ever quite as sweet as the promise of relief. Finally, she sprinkles in a blend of secret herbs. You see a little mint, a little fennel, and something suspiciously like last year's dandelion fluff. You watch as she stirs, hums, and occasionally smacks the pot with a wooden spoon for emphasis. She hands you the cup and insists you drink it quickly, before it cools, or before the goats notice. The taste is actually pleasant, creamy, sweet, and only slightly herbal. You start to relax, thinking maybe the stories are overblown. Maybe you'll just feel a bit lighter, a bit more regular, and then it hits you. There's no polite way to describe it. The urge is sudden, powerful, and utterly non-negotiable. You bolt from the hut, heading for the nearest hedgerow, praying for privacy and swift results. In medieval Europe, plumbing is a concept for future centuries. For now, it's all about location, timing, and hoping the family dog doesn't follow you. While you recover from the ordeal, the wise woman offers advice on maintenance. She recommends dried plums, when available, boiled nettles, when desperate, or, in a pinch, just a hearty walk and a stern lecture about chewing your food properly. She shares tales of other clients, farmers, knights, even the local abbot, each of whom left her hut transformed, sometimes a little too quickly for comfort. You soon learn that every household has their own recipe. The blacksmith swears by roasted apples, the baker recommends stale ale, and the miller's wife uses a concoction of pickled cabbage and wishful thinking. If all else fails, someone suggests you jump in the cold stream at dawn, which supposedly shocks your system into cooperation. You suspect it just gives the neighbors something to talk about at breakfast. Sometimes the gentle remedy isn't gentle at all. Over-enthusiastic dosing can clear you out for days, leaving you exhausted and with a renewed respect for moderation. Too little, and you're right back where you started, except now you also have to explain why you smell faintly of goat. As you settle back into daily life, you realize that medieval digestive care is a delicate dance. A pinch of this, a sip of that, and a whole lot of hope. The true miracle is that anyone survives long enough to need the remedy a second time. But when the day comes, and it always does, you'll face the wise woman's hut with humility, gratitude, and perhaps a spare cloak, just in case the nearest hedgerow is already occupied. In the end, goat's milk and honey may not cure all ills, but they will at least keep life moving. And sometimes, in medieval Europe, that's the best medicine of all. You scrape your knee in the village square. Grandma's remedy? Pour salt directly into the cut, add a dash of ash, and rub it in for good luck. You scream, but she just says that means it's working. The logic: if it stings, it must be medicine. If it gets infected well, you always have a spare leg. In the world of medieval first aid, suffering is proof that you're on the path to healing. You hobble home, trailing a little blood and a lot of pride, only to be greeted by a battalion of well-meaning relatives, each with their own version of tough love. Grandma takes charge, rolling up her sleeves with the solemnity of a general preparing for battle. She examines your wound, declares it nothing serious, and starts rummaging through her pockets for salt. Not the fancy stuff either. Just the same coarse, slightly suspicious salt that's been on the table since Christmas. She sprinkles a generous amount on the wound, explaining that salt cleans out the badness. The sensation is less cleansing and more like medieval fireworks going off in your leg. You yelp, but she's already reaching for the next ingredient, fireplace ash, scooped up in a cracked eggshell and patted on like some ancient, crunchy ointment. You ask if this is really necessary. She just nods and mutters about building character. If that's not enough, there's always the final step, rubbing a little dirt in for good measure. This, apparently, closes the wound to evil spirits, or just proves you're tough enough to survive village life. The dirt comes straight from the garden, packed with extra minerals and probably a few earthworms. You grit your teeth, bracing for the inevitable just a little more, for luck, and try to remember how to walk with only one leg, just in case. The rest of the family watches in fascination, offering advice that ranges from cover it with a cabbage leaf to just let the dog lick it, he's never sick. A neighbor chimes in, suggesting you tie a red ribbon around your ankle to draw out the swelling. Someone else starts heating a brick, in case you need warmth therapy. Every suggestion sounds more like a dare than a cure. Once Grandma is satisfied, your knee is officially treated. She wraps it in a strip of cloth so rough it could sand a table, ties it tight, and tells you not to get it wet or look at it until Sunday. If it still hurts, she suggests a shot of vinegar and a stern lecture about watching where you're going. You limp away, patched up and wondering if modern medicine might be worth inventing sooner rather than later. As you go about your day, you notice the wound stings with every step, but you're assured this means it's healing. Medieval logic. If something is unpleasant, it must be doing you good. You distract yourself by remembering the village blacksmith's tale of breaking his arm and being told to soak it in the river, then pack it in mud. He claims it worked, though he's been left-handed ever since. Days later, if your knee starts to smell or change color, the next level of treatment is called in. More ash, a stronger vinegar soak, or, for the truly bold, a poultice made of stale bread and bacon fat. If you're lucky, you heal with only a small scar and a bigger story. If not, you're reminded that you've got another leg. Don't be greedy. In medieval Europe, every scrape is a communal event. Every sting is a lesson. And every scar is proof you survived the world's toughest medicine cabinet. So, next time you take a tumble, just remember, salt, ash, and a little dirt might not be the cure you want, but it's the cure you're getting. The local noble boasts of a rare imported remedy. Ground-up Egyptian mummy, sold by the apothecary as a miracle powder. You're told to sprinkle it on bread for strength, vitality, and a distinct aftertaste of ancient regret. In the Middle Ages, if it was rare and sounded weird, someone somewhere was eating it for their health. You'd think the strangest part of medieval medicine would be the leeches, or maybe the wine-soaked rags. But then you meet the apothecary's latest offering, mummy powder. Imported, if you believe the salesman, from the mystical sands of Egypt. It comes in a tiny jar, sealed with red wax and more than a hint of scandal. The local noble shows it off at feasts, claiming it gives him the energy of a pharaoh and the complexion of a very well-preserved raisin. Naturally, curiosity gets the best of you. You hand over a week's wages in eggs and dubious gossip, and the apothecary tips a little of the precious dust onto a hunk of bread. It's brown, a little gritty, and smells faintly of myrrh, adventure, and questionable ethics. Just a sprinkle, he says, with the seriousness of someone dispensing holy relics. Any more, and you risk feeling centuries older by morning. The taste? Imagine stale cinnamon mixed with library dust, and a twist of existential dread. You chew carefully, wondering if strength and vitality are supposed to arrive instantly, or if you're meant to wait for the wisdom of ancient kings to kick in. Mostly, you just notice a tickle at the back of your throat and the urge to reconsider your life choices. Still, word spreads quickly. Soon, every noble, merchant, and ambitious peasant is clamoring for a pinch of mummy powder. It's touted as a cure for everything. Headaches, bad backs, lost youth, failing memory, and general malaise. A medieval catch-all for feeling underwhelmed by cabbage stew. Some say it boosts bravery, others claim it helps with romance, and one suspiciously energetic friar insists it wards off evil humors and awkward dinner conversation. The apothecary is delighted. He invents increasingly creative blends. Mummy powder with rose petals for the heart, with dried mint for digestion, and, for those really looking to impress at feasts, a blend with a few flecks of gold. The results are mixed. Some swear they feel younger, stronger, or at least more interesting. Others report nothing more than a mild case of regret and a newfound appreciation for less exotic bread toppings. Of course, the ethical concerns are never far behind. The village priest frowns at the practice, muttering darkly about disturbing the rest of the dead and the possibility of imported curses. The wise woman refuses to use the stuff, sticking to her usual arsenal of nettles, honey, and prayers. If you need to eat a mummy to feel alive, she says, maybe try a nap instead. There are tales, too, of unexpected side effects. One young squire claims he had dreams of pyramids and sandstorms for a week. Another swears his hair turned slightly more reddish, which he insists is a sign of pharaonic blood. But everyone else blames the carrot soup. Mostly, people just wonder where all these mummies are coming from. And if the apothecary's cousin with the odd sense of humor has anything to do with it. As the fad peaks and wanes, you come to see mummy powder for what it is. A blend of hope, marketing, and the eternal human desire for shortcuts. In the Middle Ages, if it was old, foreign, and vaguely magical, it was worth trying at least once. And if it tasted strange, well, so did half the things already in your medicine cabinet. In the end, you're left with a lingering aftertaste, a lighter purse, and the knowledge that in medieval health, nothing was too strange to swallow. If you didn't get stronger, at least you got a story out of it. And maybe that's the real miracle. Afraid of poison, there's a charm for that. The village healer sells you a toadstone, actually a polished fossil, said to neutralize any toxin. You wear it on a string around your neck, alongside garlic cloves and your lucky coin. You're not sure it works, but you do notice people start sitting farther away at dinner. In the Middle Ages, self-care doesn't just mean herbal tea and a nap, it means bulking up your spiritual defenses. Poison is always a possibility, a jealous neighbor, a questionable mushroom, or a tavern stew that looks at you funny. The solution? Protective jewelry, obviously. The toadstone is the most coveted charm of all. Local legend claims it's a magical stone found in the head of a living toad, if you can get one to spit it out. In reality, it's usually a fossilized tooth, a shiny pebble, or whatever the healer found in the creek that morning. But medieval marketing is strong, and you're happy to pay for the reassurance, even if the only thing you're actually protected from is normal social interaction. The healer wraps the stone in a bit of old leather, ties it with a length of sheep's wool, and instructs you to never take it off, not even for bathing. Which, let's be honest, isn't exactly a daily concern anyway. Alongside your toadstone, you're encouraged to hang other protective charms. A string of garlic cloves, for evil spirits and vampires obviously, a sprig of rosemary, for memory and, hopefully, better luck, and your oldest, most tarnished coin. The more your neck jingles and smells, the safer you must be. Whenever you feel a tickle in your throat or spot a suspicious neighbor eyeing your bread, you clutch your amulet and wait for the magic to kick in. After all, everyone knows someone who swears they survived a bad stew or an angry goose thanks to their trusty toadstone. Stories abound of nobles swallowing them just in case, which either works wonders or just gives them something new to worry about in the outhouse. It's not just poison. Medieval people love their amulets for everything. A wolf's tooth for bravery, a small bag of salt for luck, or a tiny bell to scare away nightmares and, possibly, the odd rat. Children wear tiny coral beads to protect against the evil eye. Soldiers pin badges with saints' faces on their tunics before battle. Even your pet chicken sports a ribbon for good fortune, though she seems unimpressed. The downside of carrying a mobile shrine around your neck is the reaction at mealtime. Your family eyes your toadstone, garlic, and jingling coin with growing suspicion. The smell is powerful, and your dinner companions start inching away. The neighbor's dog stops begging at your feet. On the upside, you have plenty of elbow room, and the local pickpocket gives you a wide berth, convinced you're already cursed enough. The town priest is less amused. He mutters about trusting in prayer and relics, not witchy rocks and pagan trinkets. But even he can't resist tucking a saint's medallion into his own robes, just in case. The healer, meanwhile, encourages you to recharge your amulet by holding it over the hearth every new moon, and muttering a little nonsense rhyme about frogs, rain, and fast-growing turnips. You do it, because who's to say it doesn't help? Of course, the real magic might just be faith, and a healthy respect for medieval risk. Whether your toadstone is a mystical relic, a well-polished fossil, or just a lucky rock, it helps you sleep a little easier at night, even if the only thing it truly repels is unwanted dinner conversation. At the end of the day, You realize that survival isn't just about what you swallow, it's about what you carry with you, both in your pocket and in your imagination. And in medieval Europe, there's nothing quite as soothing as the soft clink of your toadstone, the gentle aroma of garlic, and the certainty that, one way or another, you're covered. The house feels heavy, the air is thick. The local healer bursts in waving a bundle of smouldering sage and insists everyone sing a hymn while she walks in circles. Bad air is blamed for everything from headaches to heartbreak. So if your day goes wrong, just light up some herbs, chant loudly, and hope the spirits are less annoyed than your neighbors. It doesn't take much to summon the healer. A stuffy room, a lingering cough, or even the neighbor's goat giving you side-eye will do. The moment someone complains that the air feels strange, it's time for a cleansing. Part ritual, part musical theater, all spectacle. The healer sweeps into the house, a living cloud of aromatic smoke trailing behind her, her apron pockets filled with sprigs of sage, rosemary, and the occasional emergency onion. She doesn't knock, she just enters, declaring, "We need to clear the miasma." Her voice carries the authority of someone who's been banishing bad air since before you were born. Everyone is ordered to stand, hands folded or at least not picking their noses, and to join in the hymn, usually a song about Saint Michael or the joys of not having boils. The sage bundle crackles as she waves it through the room, pausing at every window, corner, and especially the darkest, coldest parts of the cottage. Smoke curls along the ceiling, drifting into every shadow. The smell is strong, earthy, and oddly comforting, though it does have the side effect of making you crave roast chicken for the rest of the day. The healer's chanting blends with the family's off-key harmonies, and you find yourself humming along, if only because it's better than being accused of letting the evil air stay. The process is elaborate. Sometimes she throws in a handful of salt for purification, or sprinkles vinegar on the floor. If she's feeling theatrical, she beats a copper pot with a wooden spoon to scare away the stubborn spirits. If you ask for proof, it works. She'll just point out that nobody's sneezed since she started. You begin to suspect the real cure is distraction. By the time the ritual is over, everyone's forgotten what they were sick about in the first place. Medieval medicine is obsessed with air. Illness is said to drift in on night breezes, hiding in the corners, lurking under beds. The only solution? Make the air so pungent, no self-respecting disease would stick around. Sage is the favorite. But if supplies run low, anything that burns and doesn't explode is fair game. Some days, the house smells like a forest fire. Other days, like burnt cabbage and optimism. Neighbors sometimes join in, partly for the fun, partly because everyone loves an excuse to sing at full volume without judgment. By the time the healer is done, the house is smoky, the pets are hiding under the table, and the baby has stopped crying, probably from the shock of hearing Grandpa's attempt at a high note. As the healer departs, she leaves a smouldering bundle on the hearth and offers stern advice. Open the windows every morning. Let in the good air, chase out the bad. She winks, pockets your last onion as payment, and vanishes in a swirl of herb-scented smoke, leaving your home purified, your family exhausted, and your neighbors wondering if they're next on her list. The house feels lighter, or maybe just more ventilated. The headache is gone, the spirits are, hopefully, appeased, and for a brief, fragrant moment, you're convinced you're breathing the cleanest air in medieval Europe. Sometimes, all you really need is a little song, a lot of smoke, and the hope that the only thing left lingering is the laughter. And that's where we leave you, somewhere between a handful of poppy seeds, a mug of mystery ale, and a sack of dried frogs. Tonight, you survived a tour of the medieval medicine cabinet. You've braved leech therapy, dodged accidental nightshade overdoses, and discovered that the only thing more unpredictable than medieval disease was the cure. If you're still awake, congratulations. You would have been a medical miracle in 1373. But in all seriousness, as you lie back in your clean bed, maybe with a fan humming in the background and not a single goat sharing your pillow. Take a second to appreciate just how lucky you are. The only thing in your medicine drawer likely to cause hallucinations is expired cough syrup, not your breakfast bread. No one's recommending beetle powder for your cough or feeding you wine until you forget your own name, unless you're at a wedding. In which case, medieval traditions live on. So tonight, as you drift off, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to the ancestors who swallowed mummy dust so you could have ibuprofen, who risked everything for a few extra hours of sleep, and who managed, against all odds, to survive long enough to keep the human experiment going. Because history isn't just gross and terrifying, it's proof that people are creative, stubborn, and occasionally completely out of their minds. May your dreams be free of dancing plagues and suspicious monks. Sleep well, stay curious, and remember, the next time you reach for a painkiller, you're living someone's wildest medieval fantasy. Good night, and thanks for listening.